"But please, sir," says I, "if I do go to church, what the better shall I be? I want to have my sins blotted out, and to feel that they are remembered no more against me, and that the love of God is shed abroad in my heart. And if I can get no good by reading my Bible and saying my prayers at home, what good shall I get by going to church?" "The church," says he, "is the place appointed by God for his worship. It's your duty to go there as often as you can. If you want comfort, you must seek it in the path of duty." And a deal more he said, but I cannot remember all his fine words. However, it all came to this, that I was come to church as often as ever I could, and bring my prayer book with me, and read up all the sponsors after the clerk, and stand, and kneel, and sit, and do all as I should, and take the Lord's Supper at every opportunity, and hearken his sermons, and Master Blythe's, and it'd all be all right. If I went on doing my duty, I should get a blessing at last. "But if you get no comfort that way," says he, "it's all up." "Then, sir," says I, "should you think I'm a reprobate?" "Why," says he says, "if you do your best to get to heaven and can't manage it, you must be one of those that seek to enter in at the strait gate and shall not be able." And then he asked me if I'd seen any of the ladies of the hall about that morning. So I told him where I'd seen the young missus go on the Moss Lane. And he kicked my poor cat right across the floor, and went after him as gay as a lark, but I was very sad. That last word of his fair sunk into my heart, and lay there like a lump of lead, till I was weary to bear it. Howsever, I follered his advice. I thought he meant it all for the best, though he had a queer way with him. But you know, miss, he's rich and young, and such like cannot right understand the thoughts of a poor old woman such as me. But, howsever, I did my best to do all as he bade me. But maybe I'm plaguing you, miss, with my chatter. "Oh, no, Nancy. Go on and tell me all." "Well, my rheumatiz got better. I know not whether we're going to church or not, but one frosty Sunday I got this cold in my eyes. The inflammation didn't come on all at once like, but bit by bit. But I wasn't going to tell you about my eyes. I was talking about my trouble of mind. And to tell the truth, Miss Grey, I don't think it was anyways eased by coming to church, not to speak on at least. I like got my health better, but that didn't mend my soul. I hearkened and hearkened the ministers, and read at my prayer book, but it was all like sounding brass in a tinkling cymbal. The sermons I couldn't understand, and the prayer book only served to show me how wicked I was, that I could read such good words and never be no better for it, and often feel it a sore labour and a heavy task beside, instead of a blessing and a privilege as all good Christians does. It seemed like as all were barren and dark to me. And then them dreadful words, "Many shall seek to enter in, and shall not be able," they like as they fair dried up my spirit. But one Sunday, when Master Hatfield gave out about the sacrament, I noticed where he said, "If there be any of you that cannot quiet his own conscience, but requireth further comfort or counsel, let him come to me, or some other discreet and learned minister of God's word, and open his grief." So next Sunday morning, afore service, I just looked into the vestry and began a-talking to the rector again. I hardly could fashion to take such a liberty, but I thought when my soul was at stake I shouldn't stick at a trifle. But he said he hadn't time to attend to me then. "And, indeed," says he, "I've nothing to say to you but what I've said before. Take the sacrament, of course, and go on doing your duty, and if that won't serve you, nothing will, so don't bother me any more." So then I went away. But I heard Master Weston. Master Weston was there, miss. This was his first Sunday at Horton, you know, and he was in the vestry in his surplice, helping the rector on with his gown. "Yes, Nancy." And I heard him ask Master Hatfield who I was, and he said, "Oh, she's a canting old fool." And I was very ill-grieved, Miss Grey, but I went to my seat, and I tried to do my duty as aforetime, but I like got no peace. And I even took the sacrament, but I felt as though I were eating and drinking to my own damnation all the time. So I went home, sorely troubled. But next day, afore I'd gotten fettled up, for indeed, miss, I'd no heart to sweeping and fettling and washing pots, so I sat me down in the muck. Who should come in but Master Weston? I started Simon's up then, and sweeping and doing, and I expected he'd begin a-calling me for my idle ways, as Master Hatfield would ha' done, but I was mista'en. He only bid me good morning, like, in a quiet, decent way. So I dusted him a chair, and fettled up the fireplace a bit, but I hadn't forgotten the rector's words, so says I wonder, sir, you should give yourself that trouble, to come so far to see a canting old fool such as me." He seemed taken aback at that, but he would fain persuade me that the rector was only in jest, and when that wouldn't do, he says, "Well, Nancy, you shouldn't think so much about it. Mr. Hatfield was a little out of humour just then. You know we're none of us perfect. Even Moses spoke unadvisedly with his lips. But now sit down a minute, if you can spare the time, and tell me all your doubts and fears, and I'll try to remove them." So I sat me down and met him. He was quite a stranger, you know, Miss Grey, and even younger nor Master Hatfield, I believe, and I had thought him not so pleasant-looking as him, and rather a bit crossish, at first, to look at, but he spake so civil-like, and when the cat, poor thing, jumped on to his knee, he only stroked her and gave a bit of a smile, so I thought that was a good sign. For once, when she did so to the rector, he knocked her off, as like it might be in scorn and anger, poor thing. But you can't expect a cat to know manners like a Christian, you know, Miss Grey. "No, of course not, Nancy. But what did Mr. Weston say then?" "He said naught, but he listened to me as steady and patient as could be, and never a bit of scorn about him. So I went on, and telled him all, just as I've told you, and more too. 'Well,' says he, 'Mr. Hatfield was quite right in telling you to persevere in doing your duty, but in advising you to go to church and attend to the service, and so on, he didn't mean that was the whole of a Christian's duty. He only thought you might there learn what more was to be done, and be led to take delight in those exercises, instead of finding them a task and a burden. And if you had asked him to explain those words that trouble you so much, I think he would have told you, that if many shall seek to enter in at the strait gate and shall not be able, it is their own sins that hinder them, just as a man with a large sack on his back might wish to pass through a narrow doorway, and find it impossible to do so unless he would leave his sack behind him. But you, Nancy, I dare say, have no sins that you would not gladly throw aside, if you knew how?" "Indeed, sir, you speak truth," said I. "Well," says he, "you know the first and greatest commandment, and the second, which is like unto it, on which two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. You say you cannot love God, but it strikes me that if you rightly consider who and what he is, you cannot help it. He is your Father, your best friend. Every blessing, everything good, pleasant, or useful comes from him, and everything evil, everything you have reason to hate, to shun, or to fear, comes from Satan, his enemy as well as ours. And for this cause was God manifest in the flesh, that he might destroy the works of the devil. In one word, God is love, and the more of love we have within us, the nearer we are to him, and the more of his spirit we possess." "Well, sir," I said, "if I can always think on these things, I think I might well love God. But how can I love my neighbours, when they vex me, and be so contrary and sinful as some of 'em is?" "It may seem a hard matter," says he, "to love our neighbours, who have so much of what is evil about them, and whose faults so often awaken the evil that lingers within ourselves. But remember that he made them, and he loves them. And whosoever loveth him that begat, loveth him that is begotten also. And if God so loveth us, that he gave his only begotten Son to die for us, we ought also to love one another. But if you cannot feel positive affection for those who do not care for you, you can at least try to do to them as you would they should do unto you. You can endeavour to pity their failings and excuse their offences, and to do all the good you can to those about you. And if you accustom yourself to this, Nancy, the very effort itself will make you love them in some degree, to say nothing of the good-will your kindness would beget in them, though they might have little else that is good about them. If we love God and wish to serve him, let us try to be like him, to do his work, to labour for his glory, which is the good of man, to hasten the coming of his kingdom, which is the peace and happiness of all the world. However powerless we may seem to be, in doing all the good we can through life, the humblest of us may do much towards it. And let us dwell in love, that he may dwell in us, and we in him. The more happiness we bestow, the more we shall receive even here, and the greater will be our reward in heaven when we rest from our labours." I believe, miss, them is his very words, for I've thought 'em over many a time. And then he took that Bible, and read bits here and there, and explained 'em as clear as the day, and it seemed like as a new light broke in on my soul, and I felt fair glow about my heart, and only wished poor Bill and all the world could ha' been there, and heard it all, and rejoiced with me.